Good afternoon and welcome. We're super excited to have you here today. I am Vander Geck. I'm Northeast SARE's communications specialist. With us, we've got Emma Marks, Heather Oman, and Kaitlyn Sirna. Kaitlyn is the administrator for the Graduate Student Grant Program. That's what we're going to be talking about today. We do have alternating Tuesdays and Wednesdays talking about the Graduate Student and the Partnership Grant Program. So if you're here for the Partnership Grant Program, it's tomorrow at noon. So we're super excited to have you here and to answer your questions. Kaitlyn's going to talk a little bit about the program, and I am going to toss up a welcome poll and just to get a read on where everybody's at. And with that, take it away, Kaitlyn.
Thank you. All right. So as Vander gets that poll going, just wanted to say that kind of the run of show this afternoon is that I'm going to go through just a like 101 high level overview of the graduate student program. And then after that, we'll have plenty of time for Q&A and just questions. A really good opportunity in groups like this is also to hear from other peers in the room and hear what they're up to as well. So with that said, let me screen share here. Okay. So yes, thank you for joining this afternoon and giving up some of your lunchtime hour to join us. One thing that I wanted to say just right off the bat is that this is my first year with Northeast SARE administering this grant program. So I'm very new to this role. So graciously, our Associate Director, Heather, is here and they can help answer questions as well. It's very likely you all will stump me here and there on some questions, but we have great resources in the room today. So first, the slide that I want to show here is just that we have lots of different grant opportunities, and we administer and have the privilege to award over $5 million in funding each year with federal funding from USDA's NEFA. And today, while we are focusing on the graduate student research grant and hope that you walk away with a clearer understanding of that specific grant program, it's also helpful to know that the graduate student can be a jumping point for other grant programs and other funding that we have, and that there's other programs that might be of interest in the years to come. And starting from the kind of top, Northeast SARE is one of 4 regional SARE offices across the United States. And so we serve at Northeast, West Virginia, Pennsylvania, and Maryland, all the way up north to Maine, including Washington, D.C. And for that, the eligibility of this grant program is that graduate students must be enrolled at an accredited institution in the Northeast region. And then those proposals must address current or potential issues of importance to farmers in the Northeast United States. And we're going to come back to this outcome statement a couple times throughout today, but the main thing here is that or at least to start off, the main thing is that all of our programs, including funding decisions, they're guided by this outcome statement, which is our vision for Northeast agriculture and the food system. And so we will often refer back to this in terms of topics of eligibility and how to write a competitive grant proposal. This is kind of your North Star as you're conceptualizing your project and proposal. In addition, to the outcome statement, there's just on this slide some highlights of the areas of importance. So we're talking about environmental and health, improved productivity, reduction of costs, so a little bit more like on the farm type work and research, soil and environment conservation, water quality, natural resource support, livelihood, employment, like good, healthy life and work opportunities of value and substance with quality pay and quality of life included, and then just general, other improvements for farmers, their employees, and farming communities. These are just a couple of things to kind of highlight from those themes of sustainable agriculture, but the scope is, it could be beyond these things. And keep in mind that at Northeast SARE, as a regional program, you're competing with applicants across 12 other states and Washington, D.C. So typically we see 35 to 45% of proposals are funded. The maximum award amount is $15,000 for up to 2 years to complete your project objectives. And this is something, the 35 to 45% of proposals, I just want to highlight is that last year we took a pause from administering many of our grants. And so there was a year that we weren't funding this program. So for 2024 applicants, it may be more competitive. We don't really know. Time will tell, but the point is, you are competing against multiple states. So being sure that you're thinking about a regional scope or how things can be impacting Northeast farms or can be applicable or, scalable or applied to other states. Those are really good points to be thinking about given the competitiveness. And in terms of the $15,000, one thing is that we know that, this is one of our small grants, and it can lay a good foundation for future research projects, whether that's at SARE or another program. And we do recognize that it's not typically, the $15,000 doesn't typically cover the full expenses of the project. But we do believe that it gives you a good start and some good opportunity to find other funding. And you can apply to our funding if you already have some other funding as well. There just needs to be a clear distinction of what activities are being funded by what funder. And then in terms of other, grant awards, just one thing that we really care about, and is one of the reasons that we took a pause last year, is that we're very intentionally encouraging projects submitted from or in collaboration with women, the LGBTQ community, Black, Indigenous, and people of color, and projects submitted from or in collaboration with minority serving institutions like the 1890 land grant institutions and other historically Black colleges, universities, Hispanic serving institutions, tribal colleges, and universities and that sort, and other, Northeast organizations that have historically worked with underrepresented communities as well. So those can be other community organizers, nonprofits, and, organizations like that. The goal of our program here for the graduate student is to kind of drive the new generation of scientists. So our intent is to encourage and support graduate students by introducing them into grant writing. And we anticipate that many of y'all applying, this may be your very first grant, and that's totally okay. I think that's one of the things that has been really lovely as I've gotten to, get my feet under me here at Northeast SARE, is that we are fundamentally like a learning opportunity and really encourage that learning space. And so we are here to support you and help you, get things going. And we do as much as we physically can to help you along the way. So throughout, not even just today, but if additional questions come up, I do encourage you to reach out. Us as a resource and as educators is a big part of our role. And I also would just encourage folks to think beyond their immediate coursework, that sort of interdisciplinary, the bridge between hard science and social science. Those are all things that I think excite folks, excite reviewers, and just provide another perspective or lens into how impactful a research project could be. And our goal also is to just really help build relationships that get you potentially, out of the lab or out of lecture and into the field and, boots on the ground, kind of talking in the fields with farmers. And this comes from our main objective, which is to have research that can be applied to our region's land, water, and agriculture. The most common question that I get multiple times a week is my topic eligible? Do you think this would be a good topic? And it's a very hard thing to answer. I look at it as a very good thing, but it's not black or white, which I think is nice. And I know that can be a little intimidating for folks. So what I would say here is that there's some topic ranges listed on this slide. We also have a list of topics included in the call for proposals on page 2. Neither of these are exhaustive lists. Ultimately, the most important thing is that your grant proposal should address one of the themes Northeast SARE described in our outcome statement and convince the reviewer that your proposal will have impact on the region. And so, when you take that more abstractly, it goes much beyond the lists here. And looking at the review criteria at the end of the call for proposals is a good way to kind of get in the mindset of what grant reviewers are kind of quote unquote looking for. But another good helpful thing is to be thinking and using the database online to search what other projects are out there and have been funded in that topic area. And if we have time, we can kind of show you how to do that after in the Q&A session if folks are interested to see how to search for that. And here is our proposal outline, a very brief overview. All of this information is included in the call for proposal in much greater detail, but kind of broad strokes in thinking about things. This is a good overview, and an important thing to highlight here is that your projects and proposals must be submitted into the grant management system, or GMS sometimes called. It's the portal at projects.sare.org. And this, list here kind of walks you through those broad categories that you'll be asked to complete in that process. And we highly recommend that as you are preparing your project proposal, that you prepare your responses like in a notes app, in a Word document, someplace else other than the GMS system, so that you can kind of copy and paste those directly in, rather than working in that live document on the platform. We do have a Word document that can serve as a template to guide you through those. So we have resources to make that easier for you, but definitely encourage that you're writing outside of the GMS portal, just in terms of making sure that you're catching all grammar and spelling, but also, technical glitches, and we don't want folks to lose their work as well. And the Word template that we have that can help you is a really good thing to cross-reference to the checklist that's included in the call for proposals. So you can kind of cross-reference your work and make sure that everything is answered, completed, and submitted. Because incomplete applications or submissions, missing materials are not considered, and they don't advance to the next round to go to reviewers. One thing that is very unique to the graduate student grant is this, the faculty advisor portion. And because institutions don't allow students to manage grant awards, you need to have a faculty advisor that supports the project. And they should be there to be providing support and input to you. They need to sign off on your work. If you needed any changes or modifications, they would have to sign off on those things. They're listed as the principal investigator, or PI, sometimes you'll see it noted as. They're listed as the PI on the contract, but the graduate student is expected to really see the project to fruition. So from writing and submitting the proposal to meeting your objectives and then even reporting out on them, that is the graduate student's role. The faculty advisor is kind of in name only for formality of how institutions often operate. And the faculty advisor piece, if you don't have somebody in mind, is something that at this point towards the end of March. Applications are due April 16th. If you don't have something in mind, definitely get to that as soon as you can. One way to see if your faculty at your institution has worked on a SARE grant is to search the project database, which we can, if that's helpful for folks, we can go through that after this presentation here. But making sure that you have that faculty advisor, confirmed and committed early on is really crucial. And if you can answer our poll here, that'll help us a little bit guide some of the later bits of the conversation. So some grant writing tips. Many folks, like I said, this is probably your first grant application. Reviewers, as I said, are kind of looking for you to relate your project concept to the Northeast SARE outcome statement and to how it will have an impact in the Northeast region. And reviewers are really looking for you to identify a problem, describe how you and your project will address it, and then elevate the impact your project will have on farms. So you're writing this in a very technical format of a grant, but you should be kind of telling a story or walking a grant reviewer through the process of, here's the problem, this is my thoughts, this is how I think we can address or fix or alleviate or explore and discover. And then, here's the impact this research will have as we collect our information. And what you're going to do, how you're going to do it, when you're going to do it. And so there's a lot of information that really goes into the grant proposals, and it can become quite overwhelming, both as the writer and the reviewer in that process. So it might feel very obvious, but write with your proposal with your audience in mind. So be thinking about who the grant reviewers could be. And I'll tell you now that that's a mixed audience with agricultural knowledge. They aren't necessarily experts in your specific niche subject area, but they do know, agricultural system, food system, things like that. You still do want to avoid technical jargon and definitely build in time into your writing process to review your draft and make sure that you're editing it. If time permits, my largest recommendation would be have somebody that knows absolutely nothing about what you study and what you're interested in it, and have them review your grant draft. I think having very fresh perspective and a very green eyes on a grant proposal is a really good way to catch to make sure that everything's making sense and it's flowing in a way that is going to work also in terms of how you're going to administer the how-to portion. And from that, the most valuable tip I can provide is to really build a timeline working backwards from the due date. So the graduate student applications are due April 16th at 5 p.m. Eastern time, and kind of working backwards from that. So as I mentioned, the faculty advisor, that is a very crucial step. So I would say that's your first step, is to kind of talk to your desired faculty advisor, work with them to confirm their ability to join as an advisor as early as possible. Do think about how overextended they are. If at this point in the timeline you're having to kind of hunt somebody down and it's taking a while, or meetings are getting canceled with who you want to be your faculty advisor, you might be considering maybe they're overextended. So that's a good opportunity to be thinking if there's somebody else that might be a good fit. Build in enough time to not only think thoroughly through the project and about how to have the faculty advisor and how you're going to complete the full project, but how and who you might be partnering with. So recruiting collaborators and obtaining letters of commitments, those can also take a good bit of time. So think and identify those folks as early as you can, so you can include those in your proposal. And yeah, just across the board, the collaborative projects can feel like herding cats. So organizing your efforts and asks very clearly and early on is super important. And my most highest level important tip that I can provide as somebody who's been on the other side writing grants is that you really want to, if you can, build time to step away from your grant proposal. I think it's really easy to kind of like hunker down at your computer and hit all the keys and type the thing, and you edit it in the same day, and you're reviewing everything in the same day. And because you have been working in those documents and in that headspace, it's a lot easier to miss mistakes or errors. And so if you can't have somebody else help review your grant draft, having time to just step away will help you be able to come to the proposal a second day, so that you're not glossing over edits in the document, because that's the same document you've been in all day. So I would say go for a walk, stretch your legs. If you come back stumped, we do have a YouTube channel with lots of other information. This is not our first Q&A that we've held, and so we've been blogging and publicly posting the questions and answers that we've had in these Q&A sessions. Those are on our web as well. And then you can always contact me at northeast-gs@SARE.org as well. And yeah, we have a really great team of folks here ready to help as much as we can. So I knew I just threw a lot of information out, and we can pause, go back to slides, whatever we need. The next, what do we got? 40 minutes is your time of what questions you have and how we can be of support.
Question from Joe.
Hello?
We can
Hi,
hear you.
can you hear me? Oh, okay. So one of my questions was, do you want us to specifically state our hypotheses and predictions if it's part of a chapter of our dissertation?
Heather, maybe you can jump in on the end of this, but I would say yes, as clear as you can be of what you're researching and what you think could happen. As somebody who's been in the research realm, we want to make sure that you're open to having other things come up, so that it's not just singular tunnel vision, but as clear as you can be of what you're thinking and where you're headed is the best advice for a clear proposal.
Yeah, I agree with Kaitlyn. I'm looking at the call for proposals under the plan of work objectives. It's really clear that you should only be listing the objectives that this proposal will address. But if those are going to lack clarity without stating the larger hypothesis that they're falling under, then you're really going to want to make sure you include that so that reviewers understand that they understand the whole picture.
Thanks.
Looks like Rebecca has a question.
Yeah, hi, can you hear me? Thank you so
Yes.
much for the very helpful presentation. I guess I have a question about how to, decide which grant program makes the most sense to even apply to. So me and my team, we're composed of recent graduates. So therefore, we aren't technically associated with an institution officially anymore, but we could still consider ourselves independent scholars who are really interested in questions related to our agriculture. So in this case, what do you recommend? Do you recommend maybe not going through the graduate student grant program route and instead perhaps going through like the partnership route or the research and education route? I guess what are your initial reactions to that?
Yeah, I don't think the graduate student would be a good fit. And if other SARE folks want to clarify, I think that's like one of those weird areas of if like, are you still enrolled at the institution where you officially are a graduate student? Like there are very specific eligibilities of being a graduate student, but even just hearing that you have multiple folks working on this scope, I do think another project or program would be a better fit, particularly thinking in the fact that it's only $15,000 for the graduate program. And if you have a lot of folks working on the same project and, you know, it takes a couple years, that will probably not provide sufficient funds to get your research off the ground. In terms of what project or what program rather would be a better fit, I would ask Heather to answer that.
Yeah, I would say, Rebecca, maybe I recommend getting in touch with staff for an individual conversation, because it's going to depend on a fair number of the details of your project, which specific grant program I would recommend. It's going to depend partly on who the primary audience is, partly what your approach is, partly the balance between research and education, if there are two components. So I welcome you to reach out to me. I'll put my contact information in the chat, and I can try to help guide you based on what you're doing to the right program.
Right. Thank you so much. Yeah, the more I think about it, I think it's less about perhaps the research and outcomes aspect, but actually community engagement and, you know, actual on the ground results. So maybe it isn't, yeah, this, now that you just laid it out, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you so much.
And there's a question in chat from Rishi. Are travel expenses, flight, lodging to present at a conference to be considered an essential expense that can be included in the budget?
Yes, these can be included in the budget. I think, at least personally, I think that there's a lot of important value, and it speaks to the values of Northeast SARE to have this sort of outreach and education component. It's one of the reasons that all of our annual reports and projects that have been funded are housed on our website as public domain, is that education piece. Like, we care about your research, but we also care that it's accessible and, you know, being taught or shared or supported in other associations and other groups, conferences, groups of folks. So that is definitely an eligible expense and a common budget line that we see. And on the topic of budget, Vander just posted a poll on budget justification and narrative. If you can submit that to help us a little bit.
I just like giving people the option to have an activity section to weigh in with. And as soon as I started talking, this baby started screeching.
Any questions on budget justification or narrative? Rishi, you're welcome to unmute if you'd like to ask your other questions. I think we've got plenty of time, so 2 questions is totally okay.
Hello, hi. I wanted to ask if we're able to get like a material for free, like for our experiments. Does that need to be specified in the budget? Like if we're not like allotting an expense to it.
So if you aren't asking for the funding, if you aren't asking for the money to go towards an activity, it technically does not need to be in there. But if it's going to pull out of the proposal where a grant reviewer might say like, they really need to do this, I don't know, XYZ test to be able to do this, and they don't even have the XYZ test in this grant proposal or in the funding, how are they going to complete this project? That gap makes it more essential for you to have it, like to have that included. So there is some optional places where you can put in other information about outside funding that you have or other resources that you're tapping into to support your project objectives. And if it is one of those gaps where it starts to get a little cloudy of how are they going to achieve these objectives if they aren't putting funding towards these particular activities, I definitely would include that and have some of that information in that process. And I'm almost positive it's exclusively in the narrative. It's not in the actual like Excel spreadsheet
Okay.
budget where you'd be putting that information.
Okay. So it's there's not a section in the Excel sheet where I could put stuff for outside sources. Okay.
No, but you can note it in the narrative and
Okay.
yeah, you can note it in the narrative around the budget, and it might even come up in other places as you're writing your proposal as well.
Okay. And another question was including like shipping costs of stuff. Is that like, do I put that in the other section, or do I include that as part of my materials cost? Like when I put down the cost of a certain material, do I include the shipping cost in that estimated shipping cost for these things?
Yeah, the full cost to get whatever it is it should be included in there. If
Okay.
the shipping is coming, you know, like separately, I guess you could probably put it on its own like line as shipping, but if it's, you know, you're buying this thing and you have to pay for shipping, you can just lump that together as the total cost of that thing.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Those are my questions.
This
Great
is the part of the
budget.
Q&A session where I point out that the best part about these is that we get to sit here and we will wait until everybody has an opportunity to ask a question. Like that is what these are. So if you ever feel like, oh, there's an awkward silence, we want you to fill that awkward silence with a question. This is your space. We are here to answer your questions. And so, yeah, just wanted to let y'all know that, yeah, that's built into it. Sometimes a little awkward silences that I just filled this time.
Thank you for your service of filling the silence, Vander. We have another question. So the budget justification has to be specific itemized list. We cannot just put X dollars towards the materials category. That is correct. You have to list out what those things are. So common thing is different types of testing that would be done. So soil testing would be its own line. Maybe you need to buy like buckets or some sort of collection gathering device would be its own budget line as well. So they should be line by line, different items, and then your individual items should be under those specific categories. So materials as one of the categories.
I have a question about connecting our project with a larger project. And if we wanted to take this funding to add like an entirely new part to the project, but it would be interesting to combine our results from our part with this larger study, is that something that we're able to do, or we really need to have it be entirely independent?
I think either more detail or a personal conversation would better be suited for this conversation. One of the things that often comes up, especially in graduate students, is there's some language specifically about it. This should not just be expanding existing initiatives. So, you know, if you have an institution farm, it shouldn't just be, you know, making that farm bigger. If you're going to plant something new on that farm, like if there's a new concept being integrated, that could be part of your project proposal. So like what you're describing is still a little bit more in the gray area of understanding, is it new elements that you would be combining with this other, you know, group or this other research that's being done, or is it just like duplication of that just in different ways? And you're welcome to respond and speak to that now, and we can try to tease this out, or I'm happy to have a further conversation, or if Heather or others have other thoughts on that one.
Yeah, I can attempt to expand on it a little bit, but I don't want to take time away from other people if they had other questions at this point.
I think
I'd
we have
say,
time if you're, sorry to jump in, Kaitlyn.
yeah, go for
Okay.
it.
So basically the idea is adding an entirely new research question, but it would use a system that's already in place. So instead of having to like build it from the ground up, but it would be like an entirely new set of laboratory testings, new laboratory equipment, and it would never get done unless it was funded through your all's grant. But the part where I'm asking about is, it would be interesting to be able to analyze the data that this project could generate in connection with data generated in the larger project that uses the same infrastructure, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I would say that is totally within the realm of expanding research, and that would be okay, as how you described it.
Okay, that would be great. Thank you.
Sure. Okay, Abigail is asking, are pilot projects that don't necessarily involve on-farm research due to the budgetary constraint allowed? Sorry, for some reason, my brain is not computing like written word very well right now. So I think what I'm hearing is that you're more asking if you aren't having on-farm research because of the budgetary constraints, if that project is allowed. Is that the core of what you're asking, or is it more about the fact that it's a pilot project?
I guess both. I don't know how well you can hear me. But yeah, it's like my idea was kind of meant more to be a pilot project that would help justify like applying for future grants that would involve on-farm research, but I can't do like the larger scale trial with $15,000.
Yeah.
So that was my question, I guess.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So yeah, we're very cognizant of the fact that it's $15,000, and honestly, it could be looked poorly from a reviewer's perspective if you start packing on 100 activities with only $15,000, because it starts to cloud up the like trust in being able to accomplish those things. So if your project is going to lay the foundation for potentially future projects, that is fine. It's okay to it be only like a portion of what you would see being multiple phases of your research. Again, the thing that I would hone in on is making sure that your project is speaking to those outcome statements, making sure that you are and conveying to the reviewer that your project is important to the outcome statement that we've shared. It will have an impact on Northeast farmers. And as long as you can do that and share what you will use the $15,000 for, that is really the core of, I think, your question here.
I guess what I'm having trouble with is that the research projects that I had in mind itself, like, probably won't help farmers at all, because it would just be preliminary data for a future project that could possibly help farmers. And that's really what I'm wondering, I guess.
Yeah, in a situation like that, like where I would prompt you to kind of be thinking is if you were to have funding in the future, like what would those other collaborators be? Like, what is the gap that you need to have it be impactful for farms? So maybe having partnerships with other folks, or having conversations or letters of commitments with other organizations or institutions that are saying, if this research is done, we will invest, or we will use this to do future research. Like, if it's foundational research in that sense, I think you could make the case for it. It definitely would require some very, clear writing of what the trajectory is and what the timeline is to get to that impact on farmers. But yeah, it's really about that framing there. And as Heather put in the chat, it does have to have, potential importance to Northeast farmers. Like, if it's something that it's going to lay the groundwork for future research or future support, I do think you can make that case. You have the card stacked a little bit more against you, and just making sure that you're very, very clearly communicating what those phases are.
I want to make sure that we get to Rebecca's question, but I also wanted to offer Heather the opportunity with that, because I know that I've seen some projects that have come through that have looked at developing a system in the graduate student program that then move on to other programs to carry out that same. So they build the framework of saying, we're going to design a new system of research for how farmers collect data. And then the other projects are, we're going to test this new system out with other farmers in the field and see how that goes. And Heather, if you could provide some more specific examples. I'm racking my brain. I know it's somewhere in there.
Sure. Yeah, I think thanks, Vander. I think that Kaitlyn captured this, and I think we're just trying to make it as clear as possible, because it's not a perfect bright line, which is that, Northeast SARE's legislated audience that we have to serve ultimately is farmers. That being said, the graduate student program was created to create a pathway for future researchers in this field to develop their ideas and their projects with SARE as a partner. So we see lots of graduate students. Just to give a different example, we see lots of graduate student projects that are purely lab research. They're never talking to a farmer. That's okay, as long as it's clear how whatever question they're addressing is relevant to farmers. And so I think, Abigail, I think that as long as you're making it clear that whatever you're piloting is relevant to the farming community, to farmers down the line, it's fine if you don't ever talk to a farmer in the graduate student program. And to Vander's point, we have seen graduate student projects start working on something, and then that become a different grant proposal to a different program down the line. So I definitely think your idea is eligible. But to Kaitlyn's point, you just need to make it really clear to reviewers, like, why is whatever question you're asking relevant to the farming community?
Thanks,
Thank
Heather.
you so much. And Rebecca, you've been so patient. I appreciate that.
Well, thank you so much. Well, Heather, I'm sure I'm going to reach out to you, but I just thought I'd throw this question out anyway. But what is the grant appetite, I guess, for just starting agriculture projects from literally zero, like as a, as a place to test new, I guess, bring in a farmer that may not be a farmer yet, and test new methods. This site I'm particularly thinking about right now is recently been cleared. There's aspects of community and ecological healing that we, as a design team, basically, we want to practice, certain modes of permaculture on, as well as social engagement. And it is starting from zero, essentially. And I guess, what is the appetite for, reviewers to be seeing projects that are literally like very, very fresh and pilot projects?
Thank you for your question, Rebecca. There is a functional difference in this situation, in this context, between reviewer appetite and legislated allowed to fund. And so there might be a lot of reviewers who would love that idea, but you may find that Northeast SARE is not the right program. We are legislated to serve farmers, and we do have a specific definition that I was just trying to scramble to find for you, but somebody else might be able to find before me and put it in the chat. And then the folks that you're ultimately serving do have to meet that definition. Now, we do have a flexible interpretation in terms of the USDA definition is folks who are generating at least $1,000. That being said, we recognize that indigenous communities and urban agriculture, oftentimes they are generating $1,000 worth of product. They might just be choosing not to sell it. And so we recognize that still as farming. But if you're talking about building a farm, there are some federal programs that might be able to support you, but most USDA programs do not support capital infrastructure. And so that can make funding startups certainly extremely difficult with SARE and difficult with most federal grant programs. So again, Rebecca, I think that this is probably, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to have a conversation about this. This may not be super specific to the graduate student program.
Right.
A quick shout out, because Northeast SARE stuff generally is what I'm here for. Our resources and learning page, SARE's been in existence for almost 40 years and has been built up this very large database of publicly accessible things. So if someone's starting as a farmer ground up, they might need information right now more than they need grants. And so, and our resources page is full of great books and bulletins and a lot of very valuable information that's good for a farmer who's starting off. And if you're designing and working with these resources as a beginning farmer, and you're kind of already immersing yourself in the language that we use and where things are at, it will strengthen proposals further down the line. If you start a farm and you use use SARE resources from the very beginning, when you go to write a SARE grant, you're already going to know all the language and all of the techniques that are going to be at the forefront of where we're at as an organization nationally.
Got it. Thank you so much.
Question in the chat from Rishi: what else would be considered as outreach activities, and what would be valued as impact of the work?
So outreach, we identified some, conferences and speaking engagements like that are one outreach activity. Other educational, like on-farm site visits or field walks. Trying to think, even just like public tabling or partnerships with other organizations could be factored as outreach. Really just the outreach portion is we really want to make sure that you are sharing information with relevant audiences and building an inclusive community of how you're integrating in agriculture, how you're sharing about agriculture, and making sure that there's just, opportunities for sharing to occur. And then in terms of what would be valued as impact of the work, do you mean like, could you maybe say a little bit more about the impact portion? If you mean like impact of outreach or impact of the project itself?
Both, like where we have to specify both, like what would be the impact, or like what would you consider as, like what would be valued when talking about impact?
So in terms of outcome things from the communications, I'm just gonna type it.
No problem.
And then other things that are often tracked are number of participants, if you're tracking any sort of like learned knowledge or obtained knowledge occurring, if you're giving a presentation, little polls like what we're sharing here today to track what information has been transferred or how well that's been received. Those things can count as impact. We can also, I think impact is a little bit easier to answer too if like I have better understanding of what sorts of activities you are doing. So again, I'm happy to have a conversation offline to support that. And it looks like Heather has some better support on that response.
I don't know about better, but I will just name that I really understand the desire for specificity. And to Kaitlyn's point that she made in the beginning presentation, Northeast SARE has sort of intentionally avoided prescribing what these things mean to us, because we're really looking, and really reviewers are looking at you as the one who knows your community, your research, your project best. We're really looking to you to tell us what impacts are meaningful for your project. Now, if reviewers have a lot of experience in your field, they might have some perspectives that they're bringing into that review process, but we really are training and encouraging reviewers to rely on you as the expert of what you're doing to tell us, what does a positive impact look like? The only specificity that we provide in the call for proposals is like, to the definition of sustainability, we're looking for them to generally be in like either the economic or the social or the environmental bucket. But that being said, really, like we're looking to you to tell us what is a valuable impact from the work that you're doing.
I think I figured out how to do it, so I gotta distract the baby like this. So for outreach stuff, if you're looking, I put YouTube attendant or YouTube views and event attendance, and there are other things you can be putting in there. But just really thinking about what your audience is that you're including in the farming community. If you're looking at the communities that you're going to be doing your work in, think about how you're going to connect with those communities that you're going to be working with, and that'll help create a plan for you, and it'll help explain to reviewers there's a nice support and synergy between the two sections there. And we have a question from Joe in the chat, which is, does our work have to take place on an existing farm?
It does not, but we can't fund any capital investments. So if it's, fresh land, just keeping that in mind of what are eligible expenses. And I also threw in the chat that Heather broke down some of the economic, social, environmental things for impact, but the link that I put in there for benefits and impacts provides some other examples. But like all of our lists, they're not exhaustive. So you might have some other ideas that are important to your project that aren't listed here. what are examples of capital investments? So that is costs around purchasing of land, buildings, livestock, other like permanent structures or permanent fixtures on land. Greenhouses is a little bit of a weird one because hoop houses can sometimes be non-permanent, but greenhouses tend to be permanent. But any other major improvements or fixtures that are, gonna stay on the land and in perpetuity for that is considered a capital cost. And I think we have some more guidance on capital investments that I could try to dig up and link out in our Q&As and where we post the questions and answers.
I will just clarify that livestock costs can be eligible depending on the project, as long as the project expenses are clearly specific to the project. So livestock is one of those, sort of like what Kaitlyn was saying about hoop houses. They're contextual. It's a little bit, if you have questions, just reach out to us or feel free to ask specific questions now.
We've just got a couple minutes left here. If somebody has a final question that they would like to toss out for us to discuss here, that would be wonderful. And of course, we'll have a recording of this posted, baby noises and all.
Well, with a very limited number of minutes left, definitely, so we'll clean up our questions that were asked here today and provide answers, and those will be posted on our website in addition to the webinar recording with all other questions and responses that we've had in these sessions so far. So that's a really good place to kind of hear what other folks are asking, but the best resource is us. So call, email, send us a note. We are happy to talk through the specifics of your questions and your project concepts. I know sometimes it's hard to share all the details in the moment, but we are here, and ask as early as you can, because responses might change the course of how you want to go after your proposal. And April 16th will be here very quickly. So we are here as a resource. I think that's it then. Vander, if you have any
that's my
parting
thought.
words of wisdom.
Oh no, everybody have a wonderful rest of your day, and we will have these up for you if you have any other questions. And then we have next week, Wednesday, this will happen one more time, and then that's it. So we're super excited. Thank you all for so much for coming out and sharing your questions and helping just build a community of understanding.
Bye, everyone.